Many of you are watching the Conservative Party of Canada leadership race unfold. I am too. You know, the big thing for me in this leadership race, after going through 3 elections where Conservatives have either outright lost or won the popular vote and lost, is to have a leader of our party who can not just win the popular vote, not just be great in opposition, but win in the parts of the country where the Liberals are strong without sacrificing what it means to be Conservative. Somebody who can put forward a hopeful, positive vision filled with strong policy for our party, but actually win in those parts of the country where we haven't in years. So I want to introduce somebody to you today because he's making a pitch to me for support. And I want him to do this with you. So today I have with me Mayor Patrick Brown. Now, Patrick and I worked together for several years in the House of Commons. Patrick was an MP for many years, and then he was also the leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party. So Patrick, I watched your launch, your campaign launch, and it was in the GTA city of Brampton, one of the most diverse parts of this country that has been a Liberal stronghold for years. And I saw well over 1,000 people in a Liberal stronghold come out for you in a Conservative Party rally. So I'm going to be very blunt. I'm tired of losing. I know a lot of people that are watching this today, they're tired of losing. So how can you help us win? How are you going to do it?
Let me say, first of all, Michelle, how impressed I have been over the years. You've been an unrelenting voice for Western Canada in a manner that is articulate and represents the party so well.
Well, thanks.
And I have to say, for every Western grievance there is, and I know there are many, unless we can win government, then those aspirations are gone. We have to be able to win government to reconcile the frustrations we have right now in Western Canada, and that's what I can do. I've been getting elected for years in the GTA. I represent a city that is a Liberal fortress. I've won by-elections provincially in seats the Conservative Party have never won in the GTA. Justin Trudeau's government runs through a fortress that is suburban Canada, and that's where we're going to take them apart. There'll be no more free passes for Liberal seats in suburban Canada. And if we win in suburban Canada, we'll be able to actually enact Conservative policies of a low-tax, competitive economy that protects jobs in every corner of this country. And that's what I want to talk to you today about my plan for Western Canada to make sure that Western Canada has the type of voice that it deserves, and it starts with representation.
Okay, let's talk about that. So we had this vote in the House of Commons, and I know you saw it, where essentially what happened was the House of Commons was watering down the extra seats that the voice that the extra seats in Western Canada would have presented. And there were people who are running for leadership right now that were fine with that. Pitch me on equal representation for Western Canada. What would you do?
Well, first of all, let me say I would never have done what one of our other leadership candidates did and refused to stand up when Western Canada is having its voice diminished. You know, having seats based on population is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the fact that just a few weeks ago in the House of Commons, by a mere vote of the House of Commons, we are diminishing Western Canadians' voice in the House of Commons is unacceptable. And so
you would not do that?
I would not only not do that, I would speak out against it and use every tool I have to block that type of diminishment. It's not good for our country. It's not good for Western Canada.
Well, it's not good for your riding either, right? I mean, you're in the same boat that we are here in Calgary Nose Hill.
Yeah, we've had extraordinary growth in the GTA. But let me say, my commitment to Western Canada and fair representation goes beyond the House of Commons. In terms of respecting the senators that are selected in Alberta, respect the provincial process that is utilized to pick senators. Cabinet committees, We need to make sure there's a Western voice in every cabinet committee. We know, how decisions are made in Ottawa. We've served in Ottawa together, and we need to make sure that that is an absolute requirement, that there's going to be a Western voice, a Western role, whether it is a fair share in the House of Commons, whether it is the selection of senators, or whether it's in cabinet committees.
Okay, we have to talk about the equalization program because it really pisses a lot of people off out here. It's a big issue. What would you do with that if you were Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister?
Well, first of all, let me say equity has to be the cornerstone of any federal program. And it's not equitable right now to Alberta. The fact that it creates a disincentive in terms of improving your fiscal situation
for other provinces
is bewildering. And so, I got to give the Conservative Party of Canada credit. I thought they addressed this issue in the last election, included in their platform. I know you had a lot to do with that, and we need to build upon that.
So the policy that we had was to fix the equalization program by treating resource revenues in each province and territory the same, essentially.
And a lot of Canadians would be shocked to find out that's not the case.
Yeah.
That's a basic principle of fairness.
So, look, if you will fight for that principle, I think a lot of Western Canadians will be supportive. It's a big irritant out here, I got to tell you.
Well, I will be standing by your side, fighting for that together.
Good. Okay. So the next thing that I hear about in my community all the time is how the Liberal government, they've waged a war on Canada's energy sector. They've forced a lot of people out of jobs. And now they've got this policy, it's called, quote unquote, and I hate using this term, just transition, where it's essentially the government wants to continue to force people out of work in the energy sector. What would you do with that?
Well, let me say the only person I want to transition out of a job is Justin Trudeau. And secondly, at the end of the day, let's call a spade a spade. What Justin Trudeau is doing to Canada's energy sector is he's allowing Canada to be wealth generators for foreign dictators. We need to use Canadian energy. We need to be proud of Canadian energy. And this attitude coming out of Ottawa to transition good-paying jobs out of Canada, it's a non-starter with me.
So, look, there are a lot of people in Alberta who have worked hard to ensure that the energy sector is sustainable, that we are creating jobs in the energy sector, but also in clean tech and in other areas of the economy. To me, I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think that we have to, as the Conservative Party, advocate for policies that will make Canada more competitive, make us a more attractive place for investment, but at the same time, unapologetically promote our energy sector jobs.
Be proud of Canadian energy. The Government of Canada can certainly step up in supporting new technology, but this attitude of being ashamed of Canadian energy has to stop. At the end of the day, the policies of Justin Trudeau have only helped other countries.
I agree. Okay, so the other thing that really irks people out here is, and it's related to the equalization program, we put a lot into the rest of Canada when it comes to funding. We don't get a lot back. And when we're talking about economic development in Western Canada, there's things that we need, like public transit infrastructure and more. I would like to work with a leader who would commit to equitable regional distribution of federal funding, particularly in programs like infrastructure. Is that something you'd support?
Well, I'm a big believer that the cornerstone of federal infrastructure programs needs to be a per capita distribution. And far too often you see the Liberal government focus on the areas that they win seats and not actually an equitable division of federal infrastructure dollars. And there are, infrastructure investments can be a catalyst for economic development.
Yes.
And we need that in Alberta just as much as we do anywhere else in the country.
Okay, good. Now, look, I wear this pendant. Okay, it's a beautiful silver pendant, and the artist's name is Scott Hardy. And on the back, it has some words that I always use to remind me of Western Canada when I'm in Ottawa. But the reality is Scott is such a talented artist that he's displayed all over the world. But Western heritage and Western art is not often displayed with prominence in our national galleries. And I know this sounds like kind of like, oh, what's the big deal? It's a big deal for us. because Western Canada does have a culture. We do have a heritage. We're proud of it. You know, a lot of times, and we love welcoming politicians like yourself to the Calgary Stampede or to look at Western art, but it's not reflected or appreciated in the rest of the country.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up. I'm a big believer that arts is an economic driver and that conservatives should be champions of arts and culture. And of course, we should be celebrating arts from across the country because that's Canada. Be proud of the artistic accomplishments of every corner of this beautiful country. And for me, it's personal. My great uncle, Tony Tascona, received the Order of Canada, a renowned artist from St. Boniface, Manitoba.
We share that heritage as well, too.
Be proud, celebrate Western art, give it a platform for the world and for Canada to appreciate.
So one of the things I'd like to see is equitable regional distribution of funding to arts and culture as part of our federal spending programs. Is that something you could live with?
Just like my commitment on infrastructure, it will be rock solid that we have that same commitment when it comes to arts funding.
And what about artists like Scott, who are Western artists? Would they have a platform in our National Art Gallery?
Individuals like Scott should be celebrated, and there should be a home for them in our national galleries.
Awesome. Okay, so the other thing, Patrick, is look, when I'm in Ottawa, it's not just about seat distribution. And you saw this when you were in Ottawa as well too. It's most of the federal public service is located in Ottawa, and we know that deputy ministers downwards, they're making decisions that impact the country, and they don't really have a frame of reference. They're good people, but if you've lived in Ottawa your whole life, how can you think about Western Canada? It's not just that. We, Parliamentary Press Gallery, a lot of great people in there, but there's not a lot of Western Canadian voices in there. And also, frankly, there's a lot of lobbyists who they have unequal access because they're close, right? They're Toronto, Montreal based. It's harder for Western Canadian interest to be heard in those things or in those areas. You have pitched me a few really innovative things to fix these problems. Well,
first of all, newsflash for the Prime Minister's office, there is life outside of Ottawa.
Yeah.
And sometimes they forget, whether it is the federal public service, there's a place for that across the country. And there is this mindset that everything has to be in Ottawa, and there are rules. You talk about soft power. There are rules that really inhibit the ability to share influence around the country, and everything from where a new federal office goes to requirements that federal Supreme Court judges have to live in Ottawa.
You change that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We need to make sure that every Canadian that wants to contribute their God-given talent is able to, regardless of where they live in this country.
So you have put in this document to me that any new remote-based role, so any new work-from-home role in the federal public service would be open to anyone in Canada, regardless of where they live.
Once again, there is life outside of Ottawa, and we should look at the potential that exists for the federal government to exist in every corner of this country, and that means places like Calgary.
That's exciting. That's innovative, because I know there's a lot of people in Calgary who would like to work with the federal public service but don't want to move to Ottawa. So if you're committing to that, that's great. And the other thing that I like that you've said here is that you'll make sure that federal consultation processes are equal, that they have regional representation, and that you will look at greater access for journalists from all regions of the country into the Parliamentary Press Gallery. That means a lot to me. So you're going to get that done?
100%.
Okay, you've touched upon this already, but I've now watched Justin Trudeau for it's over 6 years, just denigrate the Canadian energy sector on the world stage. And it's been really tough watching our allies in Europe, Ukraine, have to deal with energy security issues as Vladimir Putin has committed war crimes in Ukraine. So you've got a section in here talking about restoring pride and investment in Canada's energy sector. And I want you to talk about that a little bit, and also how you would address climate change at the same time. Because our party, it hasn't gone well, Patrick. And I know you've been through some bumps in the road on that too. So How are you going to square that circle?
Well, first of all, let me say there should never be a contradiction in being a conservative and caring about the environment. And we have the cleanest energy in the world right here in Canada, right here in Alberta. And the policies of Justin Trudeau, essentially what they've done, they've exported good Canadian jobs to places like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela.
So that stops under you.
That stops. And, there are aspects to this that will enable that to happen. Okay. One, we're going to respect provincial jurisdiction. We have 10 provinces right now who have ambitious climate change targets, and we should have confidence in them to set their own caps, to set their own greenhouse gas emission standards.
Okay,
respect provincial jurisdiction.
I'm going to stop you right there because this is a huge issue in Alberta right now. You've got Justin Trudeau announcing that he's going to set an emissions cap on an industry here in Alberta. There's many people in the province who are saying, wait, like this is our jurisdiction, because by doing this, you're essentially putting a production cap in place. So you've said here that you would clarify with legislation that setting caps on greenhouse gas emissions of specific industries is the sole jurisdiction of provincial governments.
We have to end this attitude that Ottawa knows best on every topic. We need to respect provincial jurisdiction, and the context has changed in the last number of years. We now have 10 provinces that have all put forward impressive climate change plans. And I speak to this from the perspective as someone that cares passionately about the environment. I want to make sure we pass on to the next generation, my children, the same clean country that we inherited from our parents. In Brampton, we're going to be the first big city in Canada to have a fully electrified transit fleet with no emissions.
And no increase in taxes.
Yeah, we're using technology, not taxes. But the policies that we've seen from Justin Trudeau, whether it's C-48 or C-69, are destructive to the Canadian economy.
You'd repeal those?
We're going to repeal them.
Okay. Pipelines. You can't have a Conservative Party leader that doesn't support pipelines.
We need to have a national energy corridor. And the fact that we can't get product to marketplace, from an Ontario perspective, the thought that when I go up to fill up my car with gas, that I become a wealth generator for foreign dictatorships is bewildering. I want to use Alberta oil. I want to use Canadian natural resources.
Good. Okay. Well, this addresses a lot of my concerns, but I'm going to tell you something. There's one thing, and I know you talked about it at your launch, a carbon tax. So I sat in a caucus where our last leader put forward a carbon pricing system, and you didn't really talk to members. And I know that's happened to you before too.
Well, and I think it's really important that we acknowledge that the party membership are going to be the final decision makers when it comes to our environmental policy.
Okay.
It can't be a leader dictating to the party members what our policies are going to be. I'm a big believer that we engage the grassroots, and frankly, past approaches to dealing with this have been unsuccessful because it hasn't been done in a collective manner with our party membership. And I say that, I was the first mayor in Canada to come out against the increase that's coming again.
That's right.
On April 1st. The last thing we need right now is another tax increase at a time that gas prices are out of control. But my commitment is we're going to build an environmental policy as a party together, one that respects energy sector jobs, but also provides to Canadians a plan to make sure that Canada is a role model to the world when it comes to environmental sustainability.
Patrick, one thing that really pisses people off here is that the federal government has never acknowledged the devastation that the National Energy Program caused Western Canada.
Well, and that's why in my plan for Western Canada, there is a commitment to actually have a public apology in the House of Commons for the damaging effects of the National Energy Program.
You'd actually do that.
It's long overdue, and frankly, that apology should have happened years ago.
That's huge. Great.
It's about recognizing the legacy of destruction that we saw from that policy.
Great. So there's two things I wanted to talk to you about with regard to rural Western Canada. Not just rural Western Canada, but looking at how we build industry out here. So right now, many Western Canadians, particularly in agriculture and some who are in forestry as well, they're really being unduly affected by punitive trade policies that have been put in place by countries like the United States, China. Trudeau hasn't even addressed these issues at all. What would you do?
Well, we need to stand up for these key employment sectors in our country, and where there's been undue tariffs hampering our industries, we need to stand up for Canada. And this silence by the federal government when you have employment sectors in our country being trampled upon is not leadership. And so we're going to stand up for Canadian jobs. We're going to stand up for agricultural jobs, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that great Canadian product can reach markets abroad.
So a Patrick Brown-led government would actually get some of these bans and restrictions and tariffs lifted.
The days of silence are gone.
Good. Okay, now we're talking about international trade. There's so much more we could be doing in Canada across interprovincial barriers, and the Liberals haven't really addressed the barriers that exist to interprovincial trade in Canada, and that's actually a huge impediment to growth here in Western Canada too.
The Liberals love red tape, and one of my big frustrations in Canada right now is the barriers to interprovincial trade. Tear them down. Tear those barriers down, and a good product anywhere in Canada needs to be able to have access to a marketplace anywhere in Canada. Pure and simple.
So you've got a pretty bold statement here that you would commit to retrench and clarify free trade provisions in Canada in the Constitution.
We need to tear down those barriers and make it official. Okay.
We've talked about so much today. A lot of, Patrick, over the years, I've spent a lot of time, I've door knocked in almost every part of the country on behalf of my community, because when I go out into my community, you know what they say? They say, how are we doing in the GTA? I'm also really tired, frankly, and we're very pleased to support candidates in other parts of the country. I'm tired of door knocking in other parts of the country. I'm tired as a Western Canadian of candidates in our party. The only time that they come out to Calgary is to raise money for their own campaigns. You're not just running to be Prime Minister, you're running to be Conservative Party leader. What are you going to do to fix that? Because we need to be listened to as well, too. It shouldn't just be us going across the country begging to be heard. We need somebody who's going to come and listen to us.
I had a friend who gave me some good advice. He said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. Listen more than you talk. And I think one thing would be helpful. When I was an MP, I'd come out to Western Canada often. And if we could have leaders from the Conservative movement across the country, MPs, spend a lot of time in Western Canada to listen, to see the challenges that we're facing right now in terms of barriers to Western Canadian prosperity, just showing up, that's the first step. Unfortunately, in recent years, we've seen an attitude where we treat Western Canadian Conservatives as an ATM.
Yep.
And that's not going to cut it. We need to make sure that there is a different tone, a different approach, and it starts with showing up.
So Patrick Brown, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, would make sure that our candidates and our MPs come out here and listen once in a while and not just show up to ask for money.
Yeah, you can't really appreciate the frustrations, the aspirations, unless you show up, unless you listen and you visit every corner of Western Canada.
Okay, this is good stuff. But I kind of want to close where you started, which is we can't get this done. We are never going to be able to advocate for Western Canadian voices without forming government. The Conservative Party needs to win. And I think you've got a plan for Western Canada that I know you're gonna win in the GTA. We also have to make sure that we're not sacrificing what we stand for in Western Canada and the voices that we have here. So how can we help?
Well, Michelle, I need you to take a leadership position in this campaign to get our party back on track, to put us in a position where we can defeat Justin Trudeau. I know where his fortress is, and I've beaten him before. When I ran for mayor of Brampton, his MPs were out there saying they were willing to do anything to stop me from being successful, and I still won. I've won provincial by-elections where Justin Trudeau has personally been out there campaigning for the Liberal Party candidate. I know how to beat Justin Trudeau. I know how to defeat Liberals in their strongest areas in this country. And if we do that, we're going to form a government. But more importantly for you, because I know what you're most passionate about, if we win government, every grievance that Western Conservatives have raised over the years will finally be addressed. But we need to win to do that.
Okay, well, look, Patrick, if I'm going to get involved, I've never endorsed anybody before in a leadership, not once. There's a lot of people who listen and they don't want lip service. They want someone who's going to fight. They want someone who's going to lead and someone who's going to win.
Well, I'm your candidate, Michelle, but we need you to step up and help us captain this ship.
All right, I'm in. Let's get this done, folks. We've got a lot to do. We cannot afford to lose the next election. I'm tired of losing. I'm tired of sitting in opposition. I'm tired of making Facebook video after Facebook video, vote after vote, where we might hold Justin Trudeau back, but we don't ever get to do our own policy. We never get to advocate for our own interest. And we also have to unite our party. And you know what? There's nothing better to unite a party than what? Winning. Actually winning. That would be great. So Patrick, I'm in, and I hope all of you will consider getting behind Patrick as well too. I know he can win in the GTA. I know he can win in every part of this country. And also, Patrick, I will work hard to make sure that we do have a strong voice here in Western Canada. So to find out more about this guy, who I know can win, go to his Facebook page. The link's here in this video. And let's get out. Let's win this leadership race, and then let's form government. Working hard for you here in Calgary. Have a great day.